You never really know what you're capable of until everything you love is stripped away, leaving you with nothing but a hollow ache in your chest and a burning, relentless need for answers. General Marcus Thorne believed he was untouchable, insulated by stars on his collar, high-level clearances, and the kind of blind reverence that society offers to men in uniform, regardless of skeletons they bury under polished floors. He thought his retirement to a sprawling, gated estate in the Hamptons, surrounded by private security and acres of manicured lawn, meant he was safe from the ghosts of his past. He was wrong. He didn't account for me. He didn't account for a father who had already lost the only thing that mattered and now had an infinite amount of time and a very specific set of skills to dedicate to one singular goal: exposing the truth. When I finally stood in his mahogany-paneled study, smelling the expensive leather and the faint scent of his aged scotch, the look of arrogant confusion on his face slowly dissolving into genuine, primal terror was almost worth the year of hell it took to get there. I wasn't there to inflict physical violence, though God knows the thought had crossed my mind 1,000 times in the darkest hours of the night. No, I was there to do something far more damaging to a man like him. I was there to dismantle his legacy, piece by rotten piece, while he watched, helpless. Before I lay out exactly how I engineered the downfall of a decorated war hero, I need to ask you something, man to man or parent to parent. If you discovered that your child's death wasn't a tragic accident of war, but a calculated sacrifice for someone else's career ambition, how far would you go to balance the scales? Tell me if you would have done what I did. To understand why I ended up in that room, you have to understand who my son was. Leo wasn't just another number on a casualty report. He was the kid who brought home stray cats, the teenager who spent his summers rebuilding engines with me in the garage, the young man who felt a profound, almost naive duty to serve something bigger than himself. When he enlisted, I was terrified, like any parent, but I was also bursting with pride. He looked so strong in his dress blues at graduation, his eyes clear and focused. We talked about the risks, sure. We knew that war is hell, and that bad things happen to good people. I could have accepted it if he had died fighting, if he had sacrificed himself to save his brothers in arms in an impossible situation. That's the soldier's compact. That's the bitter pill you swallow when your child deploys. But that's not what happened. 2 years ago, 2 uniformed officers knocked on my door at 07s, hours. The moment I saw them through the peephole, my world ended. The air left the house and never really came back. They delivered the standard lines with practiced solemnity. Regret to inform you, fallen hero. Died in service to his country during a critical operation. The official report was sanitized, vague. It spoke of an ambush in a hostile valley, overwhelming enemy forces, a valiant stand. We buried an empty casket because there wasn't enough left of Leo to bring home. They gave me a folded flag and a posthumous medal, and they expected me to fade away into quiet grief, another Gold Star father to be trotted out at Memorial Day parades. For the first 6 months, I existed in a fog. I sat in Leo's room, surrounded by his things, his guitars, his books, the half-finished model airplane on his desk, trying to remember the sound of his laugh. But grief slowly curdled into suspicion. It started with small things. I tried to reach out to the other members of his unit, the ones who survived, just to hear stories about his last days. They were ghosting me. The few I managed to connect with were jumpy, sticking to rehearsed scripts, their eyes darting away when I asked specific questions. Then came the nightmares, not mine, but the ones described in a drunken 3 a.m. phone call from a kid named Corporal Davies, who had been Leo's bunkmate. He was crying, slurring his words, talking about how it wasn't supposed to happen like that, and how the old man knew. Before I could get him to clarify, he hung up, and his number was disconnected the next day. That was the spark. The old man, that's what they called General Thorne. I started digging. Before I retired, I worked as a forensic auditor for 20 years. I know how to follow paper trails, how to find the discrepancies hidden in plain sight, how to connect dots that people desperately want to keep separate. I applied those skills to my son's death. I filed Freedom of Information Act requests that were redacted into oblivion. I stalked military forums on the dark web. I used every contact I had left from my old life. It took nearly a year to break through the wall of silence. The breakthrough didn't come from high-level hacking. It came from guilt. A package arrived at my doorstep with no return address. Inside was a cheap burner phone and a flash drive. The phone rang 10 minutes after I opened the box. It was Davies again, sober this time, his voice flat and dead. He said he couldn't live with it anymore. He said they were all threatened with court, martial or worse, if they talked. He told me to watch the drive. What I saw on that drive shattered whatever faith I had left in the system. It contained helmet, cam footage, and, more importantly, the raw, unedited comms logs from the operation that killed my son. It wasn't an ambush. It was a suicide mission ordered by General Thorne, against the direct advice of his field commanders and intelligence officers. Thorne was up for a promotion to the Joint Chiefs, and he needed a big, flashy win, a cleared valley, a strategic victory to pin on his lapel. The intel showed the area was crawling with heavy artillery, a death trap without air support, which was unavailable due to weather. Thorne ordered them in anyway. He needed the win on that specific date for political reasons. The logs were sickening. I heard the field commander begging to abort. I heard Thorne, safe in his command center hundreds of miles away, dismiss their concerns as cowardice, ordering them to push forward. And then I heard the chaos, the screaming. I heard my own son's voice, calm at first, calling out targets, and then silence. The footage cut out as the first mortar hit their position. Thorne got his win. The valley was eventually cleared after reinforcements arrived days later to clean up the mess. He spun the narrative, buried the intel reports, silenced the survivors with threats, and accepted his promotion over the imaginary bodies of 12 young men. My grief transformed into a cold, hard block of obsidian in my gut. General Thorne had retired 6 months after the incident with full honors, untouchable. He was living the good life on a bloated pension and lucrative consulting contracts, giving speeches about leadership and sacrifice while my son's atoms were scattered across a foreign desert. I knew the military justice system wouldn't touch him. He was too big to fail, too connected. If I took this to the press now, without undeniable proof that linked him directly to the cover-up, they'd dismiss me as a grieving, conspiracy theorist father. I needed more. I needed a confession or something close to it. I needed to look him in the eye. I spent the next 3 months tracking him. It wasn't easy. He lived in an ultra-secure gated community in Southampton. I researched the security firm that guarded the place. I learned their shift changes, their patrol routes, the technical specs of their camera systems. I rented a run-down cottage 10 miles away and spent my days watching, planning. I wasn't training for a commando raid. I was planning an infiltration based on patience and social engineering. I learned that the general had a weakness for extremely rare, high-end vintage wines. He had a delivery scheduled for a Friday afternoon, a crate of pre-war Bordeaux he'd won at an auction. That was my ticket. I intercepted the delivery van miles down the road, faking a breakdown. A $50 bill and a sob story about needing a ride to the next town got me in the passenger seat. When the driver stopped for a bathroom break, a mild sedative in his coffee, just enough to make him groggy and sick for a few hours, gave me control of the van. I put on his spare uniform jacket and cap. I was sweating, my heart hammering against my ribs, not from fear of getting caught, but from the sheer proximity to the man who killed my son. I pulled up to the gate. The guard barely looked up from his clipboard, checking the license plate against the expected delivery. He waved me through. I drove up the long, winding driveway, past perfectly sculpted hedges and fountains, the wealth obscene compared to the dusty tent where Leo spent his last nights. I parked at the service entrance of the massive mansion. I didn't go to the door. I knew from blueprints I'd acquired that the wine cellar had an external access point for deliveries, leading directly into the basement level near his study. I picked the lock, a skill from a misspent youth that I never thought I'd use again, and slipped inside, leaving the wine in the van. The house was quiet. His wife was away in Europe. The live-in staff were in their quarters in a separate wing. I moved through the shadows of the basement, up the service stairs, and towards the library where I knew he spent his evenings. I could hear classical music faintly playing. My hand was in my jacket pocket, gripping the flash drive and a small, powerful audio recorder that was already running. I stopped outside the heavy oak door. So that's the situation I was in. I was standing outside the door of the man who murdered my son for a promotion, armed only with the truth and a burning need for justice that the world refused to give me. I had to make a choice right then about what kind of justice I was seeking. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have kicked down the door with violence in your heart? Would you have turned back? What is a father supposed to do when the law protects the monster? I didn't kick the door down. I opened it quietly and stepped inside. He was sitting in a leather armchair by the fireplace, holding a glass of amber liquid, reading a book about naval history. He looked exactly like his pictures on TV, silver hair, strong jaw, an air of entitled command. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption, expecting a servant. "I told you I didn't want to be disturbed," he growled. Then he really looked at me. He saw the delivery uniform jacket that didn't fit right, the cap pulled low, and beneath it, eyes that must have looked like death itself. He started to rise, his hand instinctively moving towards the desk drawer where I assumed he kept a gun. "Don't," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "You don't know me, General Thorne, but you knew Private First Class Leo Vance." He froze. The name hit him like a physical blow. He sank back into the chair, his face draining of color. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" He stammered, the command stripped from his voice, replaced by the quaver of an old man suddenly realizing he is mortal. "I'm Leo's father," I said, walking slowly towards him, enjoying the way he shrank back into the leather. "And I'm here to return something you lost, the truth." I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and tossed it onto his lap. He looked at it like it was a venomous snake. "What is this?" he whispered. "That," I said, "is the audio from Operation Red Dawn, the real audio, not the sanitized version you submitted to the Pentagon. It has your voice ordering my son and 11 others into a meat grinder against all intel. It has their screams. It has the sound of you murdering them for another star on your collar." He tried to bluster. He tried to find the general voice again. "You're insane. You have no idea what you're talking about. The fog of war. Difficult decisions." I cut him off. "Save the speech for the inquiry, Marcus. I know about the weather reports you ignored. I know about the drone surveillance you suppressed. I spoke to Davies before he disappeared. I know everything." He sat there, his mouth slightly agape, the realization dawning on him that his impenetrable fortress had been breached not by an army, but by a single, determined man. "What do you want?" he asked finally, his voice hollow. "Money. I can pay you. How much to make this go away?" The insult burned hotter than the grief. He thought he could buy my son's life. "I don't want your blood money." I spat at him. "I want your life, not your heartbeat. That would be too easy. I want the life you built on the corpses of better men. I want your reputation. I want your legacy. I want you to look in the mirror and see what I see, a coward and a murderer." I pulled out my phone. "This flash drive isn't the only copy. 5 minutes ago, an encrypted email was sent to the Washington Post, the New York Times, and every major military watchdog group. It contains everything. Video, the audio, the altered reports, the testimonies I gathered. It's all out there, General. The upload is complete. By tomorrow morning, the whole world will know what you did." The silence in the room was absolute. I watched as the titan of industry, the heroic general, crumbled. He didn't scream. He didn't attack me. He just seemed to deflate, slumped in his chair, an empty uniform. He knew it was over. The court of public opinion would be far harsher than any military tribunal he might still manipulate. His board memberships, his consulting fees, his honorary degrees, his place in history books, all gone in an instant. I walked over to the desk, opened the drawer, and took the pearl-handled revolver lying there. I emptied the chamber, dropping the bullets into my pocket, and placed the gun back on the desk, out of his reach. "You don't get the easy way out, either," I said. "You get to live with it. You get to watch your world burn down around you, just like I watched mine." I left him sitting there in the dark, staring at the unlit fireplace, a ruined man in a mansion that suddenly felt like a prison. I walked out the front door, past the gate, and walked for miles into the night until I found a payphone to call a cab. The story broke the next morning. It was an avalanche. The media descended on his estate like vultures. The Pentagon was forced to open a new investigation. The congressional hearings were brutal to watch. Thorne pleaded the Fifth over 100 times. He was stripped of rank, forced to pay millions in restitution, and became a national pariah. He spends his days now hiding inside that big house, the shades drawn, a prisoner of his own making. It didn't bring Leo back. The ache in my chest is still there every morning. But when I visit Leo's grave now, the stone feels a little lighter. I told him I got the bastard. I told him the truth is free. The world loves a hero in a uniform, but it rarely asks what the uniform covers up. We trust these men with the lives of our children, and sometimes that trust is betrayed in the most horrific way possible for reasons as petty as ego and ambition. I learned that sometimes the system is designed to protect the guilty, and when that happens, you have to become the system itself. You have to be the judge and the executioner of their reputation. I don't know if what I did brought me peace, but it brought me a sense of completion. It was the last duty I could perform for my son. If you believe that justice sometimes has to be taken when it isn't given, if you were on my side as I stood in that room, please like this video and share it. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about people fighting back against impossible odds. And please, leave your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I read them all. I'll see you all in the next story.